Welcome to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're embarking on a truly epic deep dive into a foundational text of Western literature, Homer's The Odyssey. Our mission is to navigate its winding narrative, extract its most important insights, and truly understand why this ancient story still resonates so powerfully with us today.
It really does.
You've shared some incredible source material, and we're going to unpack the surprising layers from its unique structure to its enduring themes.
It's fascinating to consider just how much more complex and layered the Odyssey truly is than many people realize. It's not simply a straightforward tale of a hero's journey home.
Right.
As we explore it, we'll discover how the poem expertly weaves together remarkably realistic, even mundane, details like, say, a mother packing food for her daughter, or the simple joy of a hot bath, men listening to music.
Everyday stuff.
Exactly. Everyday stuff mixed with realms of pure fantasy. We're talking cannibals, powerful witches, formidable goddesses, and even a chilling descent into the land of the dead.
Wow.
This blend of the familiar and the strange is, in fact, a central subject of the poem. It reflects the world as both ordinary and, well, utterly extraordinary.
That initial image of the Odyssey as just a simple hero's journey, it really is deceptive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because digging into the structure, I was really struck by how only a fraction of the 24 books actually describes Odysseus's magical wanderings.
That's right.
And they're presented almost as backstory, from books 5 through 12.
Recounted by Odysseus himself.
And the narrative itself is incredibly layered. You have different characters telling their own stories, some true, some false, talking about past lives, adventures, dreams, troubles, all sorts.
Yes, it's a web of narratives.
So what does this non-linear, multi-layered approach immediately tell us about how we should maybe approach this epic?
Well, this narrative choice immediately tells us that the Odyssey is deeply concerned with the nature of storytelling itself and truth.
Okay.
While Homer is often imagined as this blind bard, much like Demodocus in the poem who sings tales of heroes. Right, the classic image.
Exactly. But the Odyssey, as we actually know it, it's a sophisticated written text.
Yeah.
It's based on a long oral tradition, sure, but it's not an actual oral composition that could be performed in one go.
Ah, I see. Too long.
It's far too extensive,
Right.
yeah. For any single individual to hold entirely in memory without the aid of writing. And its transmission, through medieval manuscripts, from earlier papyrus scrolls, that's crucial context too.
Okay.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the poem also reflects an awareness of diverse ancient peoples. You've got the Minoans and Mycenaean Greeks, who back in the Bronze Age actually had their own writing system, Linear B, before it was lost.
Right, that vanished.
It did.
Yeah.
Then later, around the 8th century BC, the Greeks adapted their alphabetic system from the Phoenicians. And interestingly, the Phoenicians are depicted in the poem as both rich traders and, well, potential tricksters.
Oh, yeah. Liable to deceive, rob, even enslave the unwary. So this deep historical and textual background, it really enriches our understanding of the world Odysseus inhabits. It highlights this shift from oral storytelling to the more permanent, structured form of written narrative, and how that itself can shape perceptions of truth and identity.
That's a fascinating insight into the text itself. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Odysseus himself, he seems to contain multitudes.
He certainly does.
He's a migrant, a king, a liar, a father, a thief, a man who cries and feels homesick. This complexity is then reflected in how the poem explores societal norms. Let's talk about Xenia, or hospitality. That was clearly vital back then.
Absolutely vital. Xenia acquired immense importance during a time when Greek men were constantly expanding their world, traveling across seas.
Relying on strangers.
Exactly. Relying on the generosity of strangers for food, lodging, safe passage. The poem masterfully depicts both sides of it. There's the ethical ideal, the sacred responsibility of householders to welcome any visitor, even uninvited guests or beggars.
Before even asking who they are.
Right. Offering them food and shelter first, but then there's its darker, more dangerous side.
Like?
Well, think about the very origin of the Trojan War. The abduction of Menelaus' wife, Helen, by his guest, Paris. That's presented as a profound abuse of Xenia.
Ah, the guest stealing the host's wife.
Precisely. And it shows how violating the sacred bond inevitably leads to widespread violence and destruction. But the Odyssey also shows how this concept could be, well, twisted, used as a clever justification for robbing, killing, or even enslaving people who were maybe reluctant to welcome potential bandits into their home.
A justification for raiding, almost.
In a way, yes. And Odysseus himself, often in disguise as a poor beggar, he constantly tests people's adherence to Xenia. He watches the arrogant suitors in his own house who blatantly fail to treat him politely or offer him food.
They're terrible guests.
Terrible. And this contrasts sharply with the negative depiction of Iris, the real beggar who challenges Odysseus for scraps. It highlights this uneasy paradox about social hierarchy. Well, elite people are expected to treat the lowly well, but the lowly themselves are often despised, unless, of course, they turn out to be royalty in disguise, like Odysseus.
So the violation of Xenia leads to chaos and violence. This brings us to another fascinating aspect. How do the gods fit into this ancient justice system? It seems like divine intervention isn't always about rewarding virtue as we might define it today, is it?
That's a crucial point, and it really begs the question, what truly defines divine favor in the Odyssey?
Right.
Zeus's own pronouncements and the narrative itself consistently suggest that morally good behavior, in the way we might think of it, doesn't necessarily guarantee a happy or prosperous life.
So it's not about being good?
Not necessarily. Instead, the gods often favor those who are exceptionally talented, especially in cleverness and strategic thinking, much like Odysseus himself.
Ah, his defining trait.
Exactly. When Athena urges Zeus to help Odysseus get home, she doesn't argue for his moral superiority. I mean, that would be a difficult case to make, given his history of deception, self-interested actions, sacking cities.
He's no saint.
Far from it. Instead, she praises him for being more sensible, for his shrewdness and cunning. This implies that intelligence, prudence, practical wisdom, rather than conventional virtue or piety, are the qualities that truly capture divine attention and earn divine aid in this world.
So the very pragmatic view of the gods, almost amoral.
You could say that. It's about effectiveness, cleverness, perhaps.
This discussion of morality and intelligence brings us neatly to the portrayal of women in the poem, which is particularly complex, I think.
Very much so.
There's this recurring idea of dog-like women, especially those who sleep with men outside marriage. Helen, even Aphrodite, are called dogs.
It's a harsh term.
What's striking, though, is that Odysseus himself is maybe the most prominent liar and trickster in the whole poem, yet deceit isn't always seen as a bad thing when he does it.
Precisely. And the poem really complicates that idea of deceit being somehow naturally feminine or even inherently negative. Think about Penelope, Odysseus' wife. She's consistently presented not just as beautiful and loyal, but also as profoundly prudent and clever. She has this capacity for intricate deceit and false storytelling that directly parallels Odysseus's own sharp wits.
Her weaving trick, for example.
Exactly, her famous weaving trick, promising to choose a suitor once she finishes a burial shroud for Laertes, but secretly unraveling it each night for 3 years. That's a prime example of her intelligence, her technical skill, and her loyalty.
And the suitors are drawn to that, too.
Yes, even the suitors, awful as they are, seem attracted not just by her wealth and beauty, but by her sharp mind.
But the poem also starkly highlights the double standards, right?
Oh, absolutely. Agamemnon's ghost, for instance, he warns Odysseus that women's value depends entirely on their loyalty to their husbands. He contrasts his own fate, murdered by his wife Clytemnestra, with Odysseus's lucky, faithful wife, Penelope.
While Odysseus' own affairs.
Exactly. His own infidelities, 7 years with Calypso, a year with Circe, are largely treated as normal, maybe even expected for a hero like him.
Which raises big questions about Penelope's agency.
It does. Was she just a passive victim, skillfully managing things under duress? Or did she recognize Odysseus much earlier than she lets on, subtly manipulating the situation?
The text leaves it open.
It allows for both interpretations, I think. And that reflects the real ways female characters could be both disempowered and incredibly resourceful in a male-dominated world. Even someone as intelligent as Penelope.
And the patriarchal structure is certainly reinforced by their son, Telemachus. He isn't shy about putting his mother in her place.
No, he isn't.
He tells her in Book 1, "Go in and do your work. Stick to the loom and distaff. It is for men to talk, especially me. I am the master."
Pretty blunt.
Very blunt. And he echoes it later, doesn't he, in Book 21, scolding her for speaking as if she had authority over his father's weapons. It's a stark picture of those power dynamics.
It absolutely is. But it also, perhaps, highlights the tension. Because Penelope, despite being told to stick to the loom, is the one who devises the bow contest. That's a great point. She sets the stage for Odysseus' return and the suitor's downfall. She navigates those expectations with, well, incredible shrewdness.
Let's turn now to Odysseus's pivotal decision, right near the start of his own narrative part. Choosing to return to Penelope and his mortal home rather than staying immortal with the goddess Calypso.
The beautiful Calypso.
For 7 years. It seems she offered him pretty much everything except a way back home. What does this choice reveal about him?
This choice really defines him, I think. Though it's important to remember the text implies he willingly enjoyed Calypso's company for a good chunk of that time after she rescued him.
Well, it wasn't all misery.
No, and Calypso's island sounds amazing. Lush, fertile, scented with citrus and pine, a flourishing forest, sparkling springs. It's a vivid contrast to his home, barren, rocky Ithaca.
And she offers immortality.
She does. She even reminds him quite directly that she's more attractive than Penelope, and she can make him immortal, eternally young. Yet he chooses his human home, his mortal wife, his own mortality.
That decision sets everything in motion.
It sets the entire stage for his arduous return journey, yes. And that return is marked by this series of, well, virtuosic recognition scenes. Each one reveals a different facet of Odysseus.
Tell us about those.
Well, you have Athena recognizing his cleverness, his strategic mind. Then there's Argos, his ancient dog, recognizing him purely by smell, wagging his tail just before dying.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It really is. Then his old nurse, Euryclea, recognizes a scar on his leg while she's watching his feet. Each recognition peels back another layer of his disguise.
Building the tension.
Exactly. Culminating in the suitors finally recognizing him to their horror, not as a beggar, but as the muscular, murderous fighter who's about to slaughter them all. These scenes are just masterclasses in narrative unveiling.
Such a powerful sequence. But the poem also seems to question whether this epic hero can truly adapt to a non-military world afterwards.
That's a very keen observation.
He can't resist taunting Polyphemus, the Cyclops, revealing his name just for Kleos that immortal famed heroes crave.
Even when it puts his crew in more danger.
Right. And Circe warns him against fighting Scylla, says it's futile, will just make things worse, but he seems tempted. It's like he's repeating the same behaviors, the same tactics from Troy. He can't quite set them aside.
Exactly. He's polyless, much enduring. It's a term that captures not only his incredible capacity for suffering and survival, but also his stubbornness, his almost unyielding nature.
You could see him as a kind of veteran.
I think that's a very insightful way to read him, perhaps with his own version of PTSD. He's prone to moodiness, fits of weeping, withdrawal, sudden bursts of aggression, especially when his sense of justice or control feels challenged.
And his return mimics Troy.
In a way, yes. He takes Troy through aggression and deceit the wooden horse. And he reclaims his own household through much the same means, sneaking inside disguised as a beggar, then emerging to mercilessly slaughter the inhabitants.
That parallel is striking.
It is. This obsessive behavior, the sudden rage, the profound melancholy even when offered immortality, it really echoes the struggles we see in veterans trying to re-enter civilian life. And this raises important questions about the ending.
Because it's not exactly peaceful.
No, the poem explicitly refuses a definitive moment of settled peace. Tiresias, the prophet, foretells yet another journey for Odysseus, to a land where no one knows the sea, eats salted food, or has even seen a boat.
He has to plant an oar there.
Yes, to appease Poseidon, apparently.
Yeah.
So Odysseus never truly seems to set aside his desire to fight, or maybe just to wander.
The ancient legends picked up on this ambiguity.
They did. Some suggest he was exiled for killing the suitors, or even killed later by Telegonus, his son with Circe. Others gave Penelope alternative fates. It highlights a kind of contemporary or near-contemporary dissatisfaction with the ambiguous state of his marriage and his ultimately unresolved nature. Can a hero who's endured so much ever truly rest?
That's a heavy question. Now, our source material includes a fascinating translator's note from Emily Wilson. She says her work is an entirely different text from the original poem, and that there's no such thing as a translation that provides anything like a transparent window. That's quite a powerful statement, isn't it? Especially for such an ancient foundational text.
It really is, and it highlights something crucial. Translation is fundamentally an act of interpretation. It's not just, swapping words.
More than that.
Much more. Wilson takes seriously the immense task of understanding Homeric Greek deeply, but also creating a coherent, compelling English text for a vastly different cultural context. Her choice to use contemporary English, rather than, say, archaisms like thee and thou.
Makes it feel more immediate.
That's the goal. It's a deliberate choice meant to remind readers that the text can engage us directly, urgently, while still being genuinely ancient. For instance, her controversial decision to translate some Greek terms describing certain female characters as slut.
That caused some discussion.
It did. But it forced modern readers to confront the often brutal, patriarchal language embedded in the original, rather than having it smoothed over with maybe gentler but less accurate terms.
So it's not about making Homer modern.
No, not about updating him. It's about making a genuinely ancient text accessible and alive today, challenging us to see its complexities, its sometimes uncomfortable truths, rather than just making it sound like, old-fashioned English, which isn't any closer to Homeric Greek anyway. It's about bringing the raw, immediate power of the original to a new audience.
What a journey we've taken through the Odyssey, from its complex narrative layers to its deep exploration of hospitality, justice, gender roles, and the enduring, often uncomfortable character of Odysseus himself.
It's quite a ride.
This epic truly offers a deep dive into the human condition, making us ponder questions about identity, home, destiny, questions that remain relevant millennia later.
Absolutely. And the idea that Odysseus, after all his trials, might never truly find settled peace, that his marriage is defined as much by absence and mistrust as by loyalty, and that he may have yet another journey to take.
It leaves you thinking.
It leaves us with a truly provocative thought. Can true peace ever be fully achieved for those who have endured so much? Or is the journey itself the only constant? Is the ultimate homecoming maybe not a destination, but a perpetual process?
A truly compelling thought to leave you with. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we highly recommend you grab a copy of the Odyssey for yourself. You can find a link in the description.
It's well worth the read or reread.
And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to Books and Bytes for more incredible explorations.